Hi everyone, we're here another week at Mutant, and today we're gonna talk about the theme of disability on the X-Men, and we have a special guest, Patti from Mutant Musings, who is the
Hi.
one that the voice that is gonna sound, and and well, okay, so before we start the show, I I want to warn the people seeing it that probably YouTube hasn't got subtitles, but Facebook does. Like in the moment we go live, Facebook does subtitles in case anyone needs it. I probably should say this more often, and also. That well we're gonna touch on them in like a broader way, and we're gonna include dens of mental illness or dens of things that are not necessarily mobility and etc., which is the way I do understand disability as something wide. But we're not gonna do only mental health on the X-Men, which would be a topic on its own that can be 3 hours, but we're not gonna do that. So, aside from Patti, we have Travis here and Gabriel right here. And well, also a shout out to our sponsors. We have that Frankie's Comics, Lemon Juice Comics, and Carson's Corner, which is our brand new sponsor that does, I think, things related to cosplay or something like that. It's pretty cool. And here we go.
This week on Mutant Watch.
So that was our super cool intro. And well, first to start us off today, I think we can start something easy, like who's the favorite character of each one of the people that are coming to the show. That well, a disabled character. I will wish that we go with characters that are disabled and that doesn't have like powers related or magical or not explainable disabilities, but you can go with the second one. But I was gonna have a second question about that, but you can go whatever you want. Who wants to go first?
Okay, I guess I'll go first then. I'll jump in. One of my favorite characters, partially due to the journey that afterwards, is Hellion when he lost his hands. Due to the fact that they actually dedicated a few issues to showing how he struggled with dealing with that, how the lack of his, even though his power is telekinesis and physically picking things up could be very quickly considered redundant, it still showed how him losing his limbs affected his ability to use his powers. Plus, I always liked Hellion anyway. And I think that, at least in the start, I liked how they handled it.
So his favorite disabled characters?
Yes.
I have to go with Karma then. Yeah, I know you're going to be talking about her. I just really liked her. You know, she was the first New Mutant that appeared, and then we saw her for like 7 issues in New Mutants, and then, you know, she's just shown up so sporadically that, like, I was always just like, I want more of her, you know, like, when are we going to see more of that? And then, you know, she came back and lost her leg, and, like, you know, she didn't really let it get to her too much. You know, she had like a grieving period, but like, I don't know, she's just so badass.
So I'm going to go with Beast. And of course, there's the fantastic stuff, which we can deal with later. But for as a kid, reading him when he was in Defenders and Avengers and then X Factor and back to X-Men, it was clear that he had depression issues and anxiety issues, but it wasn't really a thing where they put a name on it until I think the Morrison run, where they went ahead and gave him a clinical diagnosis. But seeing that as a kid and having those issues of depression and anxiety, as well as physical debilitation stuff, I've got CP. And so, especially as a kid, my hands were not always the best at things, or mobility wasn't always a great thing. And so Beast going through periods where he has issues with dexterity or issues with cognizance in that way, it meant a lot. And it was a way that I could kind of track or understand if I felt stupid about physical things, that it wasn't necessarily that I was stupid. It was, that's what depression is. That's what anxiety is.
So for me, I will go with Karma too, but I'm gonna get to a character that is with what I feel was one of my favorite disabled representations, even if it was very like the representation itself is like very few issues, but I like it a lot. And it touched on some of my experiences with hospitals, and in my case, surgeries. I went through a brain surgery, and after that, life was really weird, and that's when I got to read New Excalibur, and there was Nocturne, and well, she had a stroke, and pretty much a big part of the run deals with how she recovers from that. It's like for me, being born as well, when I was, I guess, being born, I had I think it's called contracture in my neck, so I have always like pain in my back, and it's like something forever. And I have always been through hospital things like most of my life. So when I had to have the brain surgery and etc., after that, it was like a process of getting where more or less where I was, but maybe not. I'm not really sure. And part of what I saw with Nocturne, which for me was sad that we didn't get a lot of that from her after New Excalibur, but is that she was leading a path to, a recovery that was not perfect recovery. It was not like you survive a thing and then you go back or something like that. It was not like that. It was more like she getting used to the ways in which she could heal, the ways in which she couldn't heal, and like integrating that into her life. And for me, it was pretty good, well handled for not having someone with the experience on the writing team. I think it could be better handled. But, it was Chris Claremont who wrote this, I think.
I think Claremont did have a stroke.
Oh.
I believe he did have a stroke right before that. I think that influenced that.
Okay, so that's why it was full written.
Yeah.
Thank you, Travis. I didn't know, and I was totally like thinking like it. Some things were great, but some things were like dramatized a lot. But I guess when you write comics, you have to dramatize a lot, and there's a lot of things. Like there's just stuff that is impossible. Like when she uses her powers, it's like, it's like she can't even put her words out, but she can use her powers perfectly.
Yeah.
And that's something that really was weird to me. Like, but that was nice to know. I didn't know that. So do you all have another character you like, but that falls more into maybe, it's not exactly a disability, or it's a disability that is related to the powers or something like that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, you've probably seen because it was my profile picture for like a year, my Polaris cosplay. As we saw in X Factor under Peter David's run, I think it was, I forget what issue it was, 87, 187.
I think, I'm sorry, I'll let you finish before I jump in. Sorry about that.
It was the one where they were talking to Doc Samson, and yeah, everybody knows that issue. It's the best issue. And Polaris, like, we found out more solidly that she had anorexia, and it wasn't something that was just kind of mentioned in this issue. We kind of saw it for a while, and it did continue until, you know, he unfortunately stopped writing, and then, you know, everybody forgot about it by now. But I really loved that run. That's why X Factor by Peter David is my favorite series, because he gave these, you know, super powered characters like superheroes these like very human flaws that a lot of us can relate to.
I was actually gonna talk a little bit about Polaris as well, but
yeah, do it.
In the same run, but in a much less positive way, which is how they kind of resolved Lorna's history of mental health issues and the convoluted way they went about doing that with lots of powers involved, Mastermind and Longshot and Monet, and she was magically healed of all of her trauma by Siren becoming a goddess, and it was a lot, and it really felt like brushing it under the rug to me, partially because Lorna has been so badly handled in her history with her mental health, whether it's putting on Magneto's helmet and a wedding dress and attacking Havoc, and they've kind of used Lorna's mental health and Scarlet Witch's mental health as little more than a dramatic plot point a lot of times, and I feel that there was an opportunity that they missed to actually address the mental health in a way that isn't just magic and powers, and really, you know, like something traumatic happened to Lorna as a kid, and they could have done something with her working through it instead of turning Siren into a goddess and screaming really loud. So that always stuck up to me as a low point in Peter David's run, even though I love that run.
So we got. Oh, tell.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. We have a few comments. So before we keep driving onto these characters, I still have one. I want to read to you all some of the comments. And one comment obviously asked about Professor X and said, "Do you think that Professor X being in a wheelchair and then not, and then yes, and then not, and the JoJo in this condition through X-Men takes away from his representation of a disabled character?"
Yes.
I don't think it does, because I'm in and out of a wheelchair. So, yeah, I think that's actually probably fairly common for a lot of people that are in a wheelchair at some point. They may be in and out.
So I've not been in a wheelchair, so take what I say with a grain of salt. But what makes me feel like it might take away a little bit is less the fact that he goes in and out, and more how they handle him going in and out. They always treat it as such a, like they treat it like in House of M, they treated it as a replacement, like a consolation prize. Like, hey, you lost your telepathy, but you can walk. Yeah. And it always felt weird every time he ended up walking again, simply by the narration surrounding it. It was always off to me. But I do get what you're saying, Travis, that the in and out, it is a process for a lot of people. And I think that if they done it a little differently, I might feel differently.
I
Yeah,
like. Oh, go ahead.
I am, an ambulatory wheelchair user, so I use it occasionally as well, not all the time. But if that's how we saw this, that would be great because, it's annoying to use a cane one day and have somebody approach you and be like, oh, what happens? That's really frustrating. But that's not like how he's using it. And I feel like having that as the explanation would have solved so many issues if we saw that like in the TV show or the movies or whatever. But like you said, how he did it, like it was like Lucifer broke his back and then we never saw him again, and then it got fixed and then it got broken, like, and then it was all in his head, which like was the worst revelation. I mean, anybody with a disability has heard that before. Don't need to go into it. Just need to, sleep with cabbage in your socks and do some yoga and you're all fixed.
So I guess I liked it when the Shi'ar did it, mainly because there it was just an issue of technology. They have the ability to do this medically. He's married to a Shi'ar at the time, so he has the medical procedure. It was fairly, there's also, it's saving his life and he's 20 years younger or whatever and so on. But for me, a lot of times in comics, the only time we have those medical leaps are when it is a mobility thing. Like in one of the X-Men movies, Charles can walk suddenly because they didn't want to have to ride him in a wheelchair for that movie. That kind of thing. Whereas, Oracle over at DC, there's always the, yes, we have, prosthetics and we have this technology, but I don't want to use it because I don't want to purify my body kind of thing. That's frequent in superhero comics. So when it can be just an issue of there's a new medical procedure, do you want to take it? Then I'm in favor of it, I would say.
I feel for me the problem is that they don't really deal with Xavier being in a wheelchair that much. Like there's stuff that could be done about it, like for example, I don't know, like his body boundaries or other stuff that could indicate how Xavier has a relationship to that, to being in a wheelchair or out of a wheelchair, but it's usually not handled like at all. Like it's just something that it's there in the character, but it's not like written like as if the character has had any relationship with it. Usually, I mean that's usually what I read when I read Xavier. Is like, either if he's in or he's out, it's like something that doesn't have a lot like to him. Maybe it's because I also don't emphasize a lot with him, like in general as a character. But I feel like it's not only that; it's also that the comics don't get around that theme too much. Like it's like it has this explanation and that happened and etc. And they don't deal with the. I mean, for a long time the school is like all stairs, like like. There's nowhere he could go sometimes, and there's no showing how, like, I don't know, day-to-day stuff. Like it's not shown anywhere. Most of the runs I have read, I mean, I'm not a Savior fan, and I think we could get a Savior fan for a future so on this then too, to do this better, because I'm not like reading every issue and looking through all the pages. But that's the sensation I have, and that's why I feel like I could see as ablaze that he goes in and out, mostly because he's not explained, it's not dealt with in an emotional way.
Yeah, they don't really show the school as being very wheelchair accessible when it's built and run by a guy in a wheelchair. That is a kind of big gaping plot hole.
But yes, And someone commented, "Good luck finding a Sayer fan." And
I won't be looking.
Yeah. I'm sure there is one. They're probably mad at us for laughing at them now.
And also we got a question. I think it's about Polaris. That is about her recovery after she got her jaw broke. I don't know anything about that, so I just reading the question.
I don't remember that.
I remember Boom Boom getting her jaw broken, and then she
Oh.
had to like wear the whole headgear in the beginning of X-Force. But I don't remember that happening to Polaris.
Maybe I got the comment in a bad time. Well, we can answer to that now. And okay, so Travis, what were you gonna say about the, characters that are?
Okay, so on the more fantastical side of it, I guess, looking at that, I have a lot of attachment, I guess, to characters who have body modification stuff surgically that happen with them, or the cybernetic characters, that kind of thing. Because I've had a lot of surgeries and a lot of work done. I've got a plastic cheek up here and some metal here, and genital surgeries and other surgeries in my head when I was young. And so those kind of characters, especially when I look at like Forge, who is supposed to be able to build whatever machine he wants to build, he can build that machine, right? Up to a level. And yet he builds himself a leg, and the leg sucks. But by his own admission, like, he needs a cane with his prosthetic leg that he built as a genius mutant who can build anything. He can't build a leg that lets him walk on it. And there's something there. It's like, I don't know if that's self-loathing. Like, did he do this for himself? But it kind of like, that would be the leg I would build. If I could build myself a leg kind of thing, I feel like my leg would still suck. Or, Phantom X at the end of the Morrison run, when Phantom X and Eva are split up. And I know I come back to Phantom X a lot, but it really bothers me that post the Morrison run, those are treated as two separate characters, and Eva is really pushed away. We don't really see her at all. That's their nervous system. So if you have, the meat and bone, and you have the nervous system, that's still one person. And they both go through a real withdrawal of feeling like there are things missing. There are sensations missing, which is essentially, if you lost your nervous system, or you lost, the nerve impulses, you would notice that. But it's never treated post that run as a physiological issue in that way. And that kind of bothered me. But in that run, I think it is treated that way, especially in the future at the end there, the arc where they're in the future, and you see what living separately has done to both of them. That really kind of had I feel that. I can kind of understand that, because I have issues because of some of those things. So.
So I think we got a comment that Polaris did get her jaw broke in X Factor, but I don't remember it, so I don't have anything to say about it other than
sorry.
yes, other than well, we're not that great fans, I guess. And
I'd like to mention that I have a disability that makes me forget a lot of things.
Oh, me too.
Polaris has been through so much. I don't think we can catalog everything she's had to suffer.
She's been possessed by like 3 different things.
Yes. So before we have another question, but I'm gonna say my character, because this question is more general and we can talk it more broadly. And well, my character that in social media, I'm called Duna Haller, and you all gonna know why today. I picked up that creative name when I was, I don't know, 15 probably, at least the surname, because of Legion. And well, Legion's representation is a mess, and he's not really representing anything at all. A lot of people say that it's dissociative identity disorder, which I have a non-specified dissociative disorder, which is a dissociative disorder that like varies greatly through time, and it's because of childhood trauma too. Which in case of Legion, yes, it's childhood trauma, but it's really like he sucks people in, so it's really not that like in the first. I don't know if it's the first run Legion has, but in when they have the whole give Legion therapy stuff and the new mutants get into his head and etc. It turns out he created a different characters, and one was an Arab guy, which I'm not gonna get into how that's problematic, but it's very problematic. Like it's not something usually people with dissociative disorders do, like pick someone race and represent some personalities through race. That's not something that people do unless they're I don't know, that's not something that happens. It's something that people can make up after the fact, but it's not real. And also like after that it's been in another run, I don't remember where it's been explained that actually people sucks Legion sucks people into his mind, and then the new mutants in the volume 3 go into his mind, and then there are some characters there that are fictional and some that are not fictional, so it's really not a representation. Like I don't feel it fits into like trying to think that is dissociative identity disorder, because it's not. And well, some writers have tried to reinterpret that as schizophrenia, but it also falls into, I don't know, it just doesn't stack into any criteria of diagnosis. And someone was like, when Simon Spurrier did his run, I found an interview with him like today, because I was like trying to feel why I like this run, because I like it a lot. And in that interview, he says just like that he can't like try to represent a mental illness through Legion. So what he tried to do was separate that from only a mental illness, but still try to show it in an empathetic light, because you know he has been a character that has been like an unwilling villain for a long time, and that's kind of super problematic for mental illness. Like put mental ill people as unwilling villains. And well, I chose to call myself Donna Haller to that, but I have a problematic relationship with that. It's just because I read that as a child and I was like, oh, I also have some of these symptoms. And I was like 15 or less when I read that. So I was like, yeah, I suppose I can call myself the surname. And I still carry it to this day. And I don't know if anyone wants to say anything about Legion. I have a lot of thoughts that.
I absolutely do. So dissociative identity disorder in and of itself has a lot of conversations around it, because there are a lot of theories about the disorder itself being heavily influenced by the very representation that dissociative identity disorder has in the media. And how it presents has changed drastically over the past several decades. And I like Legion best when they kind of address that in a thematic way rather than a literal way. And it does tend to leave me uncomfortable when they address it literally, which is ironic, because usually when it comes to mental health, I am in the opposite boat, where I'm just say, put it on the panel, say what it is, and don't go around it. But with Legion, it works in the other way. So when Cy Spurrier did it, it worked really well. But then the next series that Legion had, which I think was just called Legion, they really addressed it in a much more mental health way. The main character, the whole concept was Legion going to a therapist a therapist to the celebrities to try to fix his disorder, and it didn't work for me. And it kind of felt more like it was trying to check boxes, and it just missed the mark for me personally. And particularly since it is dissociative identity disorder, and I think they also mentioned schizophrenia there, and these are two disorders that present themselves in such different ways from person to person. It is a hard thing to portray in media because it's I don't know if it's possible for it to come up authentic without it being done by someone with the disorder. And heck, even then, it's only really going to be authentic to their specific experience, and it's going to have issues being broadly applied.
I mean, my main issue with Legion and a lot of Legion stories is that unwilling villain thing, because he's the quote unquote unwilling villain, but he also really wants to be the villain in a lot of those stories as well. And I think, you kind of have to pick one, but entertainment loves to do that with the ID, but also with schizophrenia in general. They love to make the schizophrenic the unwilling, willing villain. Like they are using their mental illness as an excuse to be a, some kind of mastermind, whatever. And I think, pick one or the other. Either they're sick and they need help, or they have a disability and they need help, or they are a bad person who is using a diagnosis as an excuse. But you don't really see that with people that are genuinely have these issues. There's not, like, we can't really point in the real world to a lot of, schizophrenic criminal masterminds or, these DID masterminds. It's strictly an entertainment thing that I think is really dangerous to real people and to real circumstances.
And kind of going off of that a little bit, sorry to jump back in again. His relapse back into mental instability is done so poorly, in my opinion, that he'll have a run and he'll be doing better, and then he'll just go off panel, and then he starts back from square one. And yes, mental health, there is a lot of back and forth, but it's like they just want to tell the same story over and over again. He never learns new skills. He never is starting off from a different place. It's just kind of the same situation of Legion, and all his personalities are taking over, and it just I have a lot of strong feelings about Legion, obviously.
I do too, since I was like 15. So
we have so many of these characters. Magneto, in like 1991, when they revealed that he has chemical issues, and that's why he overreacts sometimes. And if that's the case and it's a chemical issue, okay, he didn't like the way Moira treated it when he was a child in her care, when he got de-aged. But there are other ways to care for these things. Why have we never seen a Magneto story where he is trying something, be it medication, be it a therapy of some kind or a procedure of some kind, just even to, distance himself from other people for a moment or calm down for a moment. These are not like really exaggerated or difficult things to put in a story. But we never see it. What we see is that issue used to facilitate more acting out.
To make him a villain.
Yes. And I think that's where we see most of these, disabilities come into play, is how can they, when it's a mental health disability, it's either to be cute, or it is to, and then they need somebody's help, or it is to be the villain. And it is something that just facilitates their pre-existing desire to be villainous.
I just thought with what Gabriel said about representing stories about, disaffective identity disorder and schizophrenia and stuff like that. I have wrote a children's tale tell about what I lived when I was little, which was within the realms of this autistic identity disorder. And it very much to me, I could not have written that if I was living it in the present the way I wrote it, because it's like for me it's like a lot of trying to put pieces together and remember things that I don't remember, and it's very difficult to point from a present point of view. And I feel like when with how they have done this in Marvel Comics and especially in Legion, they have like taking the VC route, like to that vision that is like this is like that mainstream media representation, instead of like just doing a character that has some symptoms that they could know someone that has them, which would be better, instead of like trying to get into their head and know everything about what happens, because it's difficult to know everything what happens to you like in the moment, like just put it in the same way. I don't know, but I feel like for me it fails a lot, but I still chose the name because of that. Probably because it meant a lot to me when I was a kid. Yeah. So I just decided to carry that. But anyway, we got a comment asking us if there could be done more to represent conditions like dyslexia, dyscalculia, and dyspraxia in the X-Men. And so far, this person only recalls Jubilee as having dyscalculia. I have dyslexia too, so I vote yes.
And
good.
I was to say, when you told me this was going to be the topic, one of the first things I thought of was like Larry Hama, who has dyscalculia. And there are characters I know that have both dyscalculia and dyslexia, and I couldn't figure out what characters they were. Like, I know it's true, but it's so underplayed and underused that I was like, well, which character is it? And I was like, I have no idea, which is a shame. Any disability that is present in the comics, especially if you're deep in the comics, which all of us are, it shouldn't be that, much of a struggle to then figure out, well, who was it? Who has this? Who has that?
So yeah, I agree. I think it does absolutely need to be more of a thing. And with Jubilee having been the only one, I feel like there was someone else who had dyslexia, but I'm blanking on the who, so maybe I made it up. But particularly since almost every generation, we have kids in school. We had the New Mutants, we had Generation X, we had the new X-Men, we had Wolverine and the X-Men, and there's almost always students in school taking classes, and throughout all of these multitudes of students, they've only had one that we can peg down and remember that had a learning disability, and even then it just doesn't really come up anymore.
Mm-hmm. I didn't even remember. Yeah, so I think there should definitely be more of that. I mean, it's not a really uncommon thing. I feel like it's a lot more common than people realize.
Yeah, I think they definitely should do that, and they lose the opportunity again and again. That's something I see a lot when I see more books about teenagers studying, and everything is like, I don't know, they're studying about powers, and still it seems like everything is either very easy or very dramatic, like they're flying out of control, but there's no like these little things about how you interact with the world and understand other people that are like very common. I don't know. Okay, so we got another question, which I feel like it's gonna be a yes, and probably every X-Men ever. What's a question about if Petra and Sway are experiencing Ptsd? Mm-hmm. Oh, and
so before we started the show in our chat, and we were talking about what the show would be about, the first thing that I spoke to Duna about was we could get stuck so quickly on trauma because everyone in the X-Men should be experiencing trauma. Literally, there's not a single one that should have been saved from this. And that's before Krakoa. And now everyone's dying. Like, Kid Omega has died like half a dozen times at least. And he keeps coming back to life. And that has to be traumatic.
Yeah.
So specifically being, diagnosable PTSD for Petra and Sway, I think they probably are. But based on what's been put on the panel, it's, to me, very clear that Vulcan is, and that Sync was as well, because they've commented, they put it in data pages that the way they are acting out, and they're acting different, and they're not coping with what happened. And the fact that they at least addressed it, I loved, but the fact that it's mostly hidden, aside from that one issue for Vulcan, it's mostly hidden in data pages, just give it to us.
Yeah, I think definitely those two. But like you said, I don't think there's been a mutant that wouldn't have trauma issues. I mean, probably, like, I tried like ranking, characters who have, the most trauma. And I was like, well, Magneto is up there. And then I was like, well, there was Punisher, but that was only one really bad day. Spider-Man's had like 20 of those. And I don't know, Magneto saw all of his people killed. Like, I don't know. You can't really rank trauma. I've tried.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely Petra and Sway. I don't know. It looks like they might be becoming alcoholics too to cope with that. That would not surprise me. Also, the tiki bar, booze is readily accessible.
So, I'm sorry for jumping back in, but the tiki bar had Banshee in that one splash page, and Banshee is, I'm 99% sure, canonically an alcoholic.
That was Siren.
I thought it was both of them, because Banshee had come and spoken to Siren when she got lost. She went to see him when it had gotten really bad, and he struggled with alcoholism. I believe it was off panel when Siren's mom died. And that's why, and I'm pretty sure that's why he stopped working for Interpol, was his alcohol got bad. But I could be a little bit off base, but there he is in the Green Lagoon, sitting around with some people, not blatantly drinking, but there's, directly behind him is when Wolverines are stabbing each other in the head because they're drinking so much. And that's not a typical good place for someone in recovery to be. So I'm not a big fan of how alcoholism has been handled by the X-Men when it's not a story arc about alcoholism.
So just jumping back for a second to PTSD, I know Wolverine gets overplayed, but I do want to say one thing I really appreciated in the Hama run is that the therapy that he engages in, while it is high tech and, uses VR and all this, it is pretty much standard PTSD therapy. There's a lot of role play. There's a lot of re-examination and counting down exercises. And so I think, in my mind, that's the only time in the X-Men comics that I can think of where PTSD is dealt with the way, very close to the way that it would be dealt with in real therapy. But definitely with the alcoholism, I think certain writers don't like to deal with it as a serious thing, or they forget and just use a character. I know in Excalibur, Brian Braddock went from being an alcoholic and having no alcohol to, well, actually, he's not an alcoholic and he can still have alcohol, and back to, actually, that's some BS and it's near beer that he's drinking. And I think that was just a case of certain writers not liking the idea that alcoholism is a perpetual thing or a real thing, for better or worse.
We got two comments that I feel like I don't know how to tackle them without being somewhat about problematic stories. One is about Monet's sister being autistic, which I feel like that was something that was written and then written off and then written again.
As far as I'm aware of, they've been consistent. One of the twins do have autism. I can't remember which one of the two. And it initially presented itself when they were fused together to be Monet, because X-Men. And Monet would have these autistic episodes where she would just kind of go into a bit of a fugue state in usually the most inopportune time. And it was explained that that was because half of the people making her was autistic. So she was like half autistic because X-Men.
I'm half autistic on my mom's side.
And then when they split them back up and they were two twins, I think that there might have been one or two situations where they addressed that one of the twins were autistic, but since they split up and stopped being Monet, there have only been a handful of instances they've existed.
Yeah.
So there hasn't really been much chance for her to show symptoms.
And the other comment was about Madrox having Ptsd, which I don't doubt, and and about the legacy virus, which is a thing that we should talk in other show. Yes, it's not the day for X-Men AIDS.
Oh, with the baby?
It's too soon for the baby. It's always too soon to talk about the baby.
The whole thing with the...
like one thing that my man Peter David got wrong.
Oh, I think a few, but
there's a couple. You know, the whole Shatterstar being his own dad bit. That was a blunder.
Two things that he did.
But the legacy thing, I won't touch on that, but it did remind me of Infectia, and when she dies. There's a weird thing with her as well, where, you know, when she first appears, she is a villain and a very terrible villain. She is kidnapping people. She's a rapist. She's a murderer, and so on. And they play her death very much for sympathy. And it's an issue I actually really like, but they play it for sympathy, kind of pinning that on, well, she has some mental health issues, and that's why she had to be a kidnapping murderer rapist. But now she's dying, so we need to forgive her and we need to move on. And I think Iceman kind of shames Beast for not wanting to, or the other way around, not wanting to forgive her entirely, which is just another issue where mental health is really treated as this sort of bizarre, they really want to, or can they just not help themselves situation.
I think I'm gonna read the other comment we have, just so we don't talk about Ptsd a lot, because X-Men can make you do that. And it says that, I think it's pronounced Puck of Alpha Flight. Okay. Has chronic pain caused by his dwarfism, which when talked about was often something I understand. The person who made the comment, who's Liam, as they live with lifelong pain. And the question is, do you think Puck has been low-key one of the better representations of this type, despite the retconning of the source of his pain being magical? I didn't know about that reckoning.
Yeah.
So someone wants... Oh, go ahead.
I actually read all of the original Alpha Flight. Some of it was good, some of it was... But actually, when he started talking about that, when Puck started talking about that in the comic, I definitely could relate, because I didn't mention before, but my main disability is called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And so I live in constant pain. And when I started reading about this, when he was talking about it, I was just like, oh my gosh, like I can relate so hard to this character. And then, you know, he started doing some things that weren't I guess, very good. So I was like, I don't like him anymore. But like, he's, like, I have to like him. Like, I kind of have to feel like I can't totally hate Xavier because he's also in a wheelchair. But yeah, I don't. I'm usually not a fan of retconning in general, and especially as we mentioned before with Xavier going in and out of the wheelchair and getting fixed magically. Obviously, like, I wish I could snap my fingers and just everything go to, what normal people experience. But I think that's a really big cop out. And, people like me who are relating to that are now just like, well, fuck. Am I allowed to curse on here?
Yes.
I'm going to say yes since it happened.
of fucking course.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I think Puck definitely is, in many ways, a positive representation for dealing with things. And yeah, the height thing is a magical issue. He is shrunk down and extra dense because he is shrunk down because they live in a cartoon. But both with the constant pain and with the height issue, we see him have difficulty with both things. And we see him react poorly sometimes. Sometimes he's just an asshole because he's in pain. Sometimes he's an asshole because things are too high for him. And that happens, So I think even with that in mind, that he handles it for the most part and is able to find ways to deal with or to just not deal with certain things. There are scenes with him where he's not going to try to find a way to do something right now because right now it's not something he can do. And I think that's actually a healthy way to see characters handle these things rather than the character who is deaf, but they want so hard to hear that they magically hear for 5 panels, which is a thing that, Echo, the Daredevil character, who I don't know if Echo's a mutant or not. I've never been sure on that. But her lip reading is so good now that she can read lips through a face mask. Out of the corner of her eye, she doesn't even have to be looking at them. Out of the corner of her eye, she can read what Spider-Man is saying through his mask. And I'm like, I don't care how like good you are, So even when there's a character who can't do something, I think that is actually a positive thing.
Well, I was gonna ask you all what was your favorite story about disability stuff in the X-Men. We spent a lot of time on the questions. I just realized I'm like in the third thing I was gonna ask you all, but it's fine. Who wants to go first?
I'll jump in, I guess, but it kind of just revisits something that you already spoke about, and that my favorite is that story in New Excalibur with Nocturne. I did reread it before the show, and I was glad to see that it may not have been a long story, but it did go on longer than I did initially remember. It did not all take place in one issue. Her recovery was a process. Her recovery was part of the plot. It had emotional weight, not just for Nocturne, but for the entire team. And it was done alongside such things outside of the realms of possibility, like Dazzler dying every other comic and magically coming back to life, but was treated as still being something important and worth note, alongside, England being invaded by a bunch of evil Captain Britons. And it was something that stood up alongside that stuff.
I would say Fallen Angels, the 80s miniseries, which had some real disabilities in it, including processing disorders. There's a character in that, Gomi, who never really understands his situation or that his home life was really abusive. The way that he understands it is through his disorder. He just kind of takes a lot of things on faith. But they also treated things like Sunbird, I almost called him Sunspot, his mutant power being a disability. And that when he is powered up, that extra strength and that extra energy are not necessarily something he is aware of all the time. And I thought that was really interesting to me, especially as a kid, that these things that we see as superpowers or as gifts also had a disability side to them if the character did not know how to temper them or how to use them or get by in like a day-to-day normal circumstance.
Okay, I guess it's my turn. When we were mentioning like favorite disabled characters and stuff before, I almost mentioned WizKid, because like I know he gets crapped on a lot, but like the first time that I read Exterminators, I thought he was so cool, even though he was kind of a dick. I was like, oh cool, that's like me. Yeah, he's just like, just like a brat, but
Yeah.
like you love him anyway. And I mean, that wasn't like the focus of the story really, but like his power was similar to Forge, that he could build like a flying wheelchair so that he can do, whatever he needed to. And he ended up like, teaming up with like some of the, was it the New Mutants in Inferno?
Victor and Boom Boom. Yeah.
Yeah.
The New Mutants and the X Factor kids.
Yeah. Skids and Rusty. Yeah. I love that series. It was so good.
There's a
Inferno
lot
was
of
my
disability
favorite.
in that series.
It's my turn, right?
Yeah.
All you do.
I already kind of spoiled that with talking about Nocturne, and I think that's my favorite one. And now even more, because at the moment I didn't know it was kind of based on real experiences. And that's great to know. I think to not talk about the same story, I really like the issue of Astonishing X-Men. This was 52, that was centered on karma and was karma processing trauma. But what the really important part of that issue for me was that it had some like day-to-day stuff with her mobility aid, which didn't really show up anywhere that I remember. And it was like a while, and it was like she was having a conversation with Wolverine, and in that conversation, she was like fixing stuff and just putting her mechanical leg and etc. And well, she was talking about the things that she had gone through, which are different things that has to do with other stuff. Like the trauma of karma is like too much to sum up in a show. and and what I liked was that it was like very I don't know, I usually don't see when there's disabled characters in the X-Men comics. I think artists and writers mostly artists usually shy away from showing first parents while they shown as disabled, especially visible disabled. I mean, like that's something that doesn't show a lot. Like it's like they do panels that are like very far away and very shying from showing more, and I like that. It's a risk. It's a risk that you can take. I like how that was executed. I don't have that experience, so maybe for someone else it's crap, but I like that it wasn't like I don't know. I feel like sometimes these kind of things are like the things that writers and artists don't like to talk about that much. Mostly, probably because they are uninformed. But if you are so uninformed that you think you can't handle writing it, I say you can hire a sensitivity reader, Marvel. Which is something that would get a lot of these stories better if
Yes.
they could
Yeah.
got people that.
Yes, please.
And that was my long. I like this story, but please hire sensitivity readers for doing stories like that more often instead of shying away from sewing things. And well, let me ask you all: what do you want to see more of in X-Men comics relating to disabilities or stuff? What would you all want to see more of that you haven't seen or that you have seen but not in the light you would want to? Something like that?
I want to see mental health actually addressed, and not just in the way it's being done in X Factor of, hey, get resurrected and wipe your trauma away. But like legitimately addressed. And, like Siren is mechanically an alcoholic, and I don't want to just see it when she's on the verge of a relapse or does relapse. Like, show me Siren reaching out to Boom Boom because she's worried about Boom Boom's alcohol drink, or just everyone going out for a drink and Siren being like, nah, I'll pass. Just acknowledging it when it's not a dramatic point or a punchline, that it's a part of them, and show it that way, and kind of let it show them moving on and see them utilizing skills and learning skills. Just acknowledge that mental health is real and not undone by becoming a goddess and screaming.
I guess I would like to see, I mean, what we were kind of talking about before, like more like, well, first of all, I want, a wheelchair user character that like is ambulatory so that people stop asking me, oh, what happens? But also just kind of like show like the daily lives of some of these characters who have disabilities. Like, I don't know why this came up, but like if you guys know about that issue of Hawkeye that was just following around the dog, and the issue was like through his eyes, and that was like the whole issue. If we could have something like that, like issues like that, but like with people with disabilities, like going around and like what is it actually like, just so people get kind of like an idea of like what we've seen with Puck and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to see accessibility and coping, even in small ways. I was reading an article the other day where they were looking at X-Men comics from like the first 30 years, and Jim Lee was the only one to draw even one wheelchair ramp for, Charles in his home. It's not costing you any money. You're not building the set. They have these islands now in Krakoa, and there's no wheelchair ramps, and it's very, cool or whatever to say, oh, well, mutants don't need bridges because we can fly. And then Karma's standing there with her big robotic leg kind of thing, you have to, just acknowledge it. Show a character. If a character has a busted leg, show them not climbing over the big debris along with the other characters, because they're not going to do that. And it shouldn't take the artist that much to add little things like that. If you have a character who's deaf and they need to read lips, just draw the character they're talking to looking at them and them looking at them. Don't do this, oh, she can read lips from the side of her eye through a mask. Just draw it, do your job kind of thing.
And I don't I know we have Echo and we have Hawkeye in the main Marvel universe, but I don't think we've had a deaf mutant or a deaf X-Men character show up, which is a gaping mistake on their part.
Gaping.
And I think that it has been shown that it can be done well, but they just choose not to.
And there's a lot of, even with characters that wear glasses or have eyesight issues, their glasses are there when they need to look smart. They take their glasses off and they're gone. There's no kind of consistency with a lot of these issues.
Oh my God, and then we just found out that Quentin Carr doesn't actually need glasses. I was so mad.
I don't know. It just feels lazy to me on behalf, for the writers, for the artists. It doesn't cost them. It shouldn't take them that much more time to deal with these things in that way. They're drawing the stuff anyway. They're plotting the stuff anyway. Just put it in there and deal with it. If your character has chronic pain, show them have chronic pain, or show them avoiding things that are going to exacerbate that pain.
I think for me, it's a problem of like, we have talked about this in other shows. It's like Marvel as a company is not doing that big of an effort to do these things. Like when they do things for inclusion in general, not like only on disability issues, they do it like small pieces or like in a way that is very difficult. That it like puts itself together. Like if you want to get something like this done in your books, you need to have not only a sensitivity reader, but people on the editor team that can look these things up, because like these are a lot of different experiences, and it's not only that you hire one sensitivity reader for each one of them, because that's not the only way to do that, but to look it up in a way that you are conscious about it. And I feel like that's what they gotta do most. But also, I really just would appreciate that from this moment on, they stop giving magical disabilities and stuff like that, because like that's something that keeps going. Like the branching of these powers, like the Legion case or other cases, like we're gonna represent things that have a meaning in real life through powers. And for me, that is something that at this point, with what we know, that it says that it does, people that don't have that experience usually don't pick up a lot of good things, like don't pick up things that represent it well. So if it's only for people that have that experience, you should have those people playing a part, an active part. If it's for everyone, then you shouldn't have to be like, is this or is this not? Is this a metaphor? Is this something? I don't know. That's my opinion. Maybe it's like too much. Like I don't know. Maybe I'm too radical sometimes, but
no, I think that's yeah.
No, I definitely agree. I mean, it's we see stupid stuff in comics all the time. I think that Leah Williams got some kind of crap about having that like were-rat character. I don't particularly remember why, but there was a long post about it. I remember a few years ago, DC had some comic come out where they said like, in the text box with the little star, and then it said like translated from Pakistani, and that's not actually a language. So like I feel like we just need, people who know what they're doing, so we don't have issues like that.
Yeah. And I think with what you said about the fantastic end, I think people don't see those if they're not having that. Like Cyclops has a brain injury. He has a permanent brain injury. How many people, think of that in terms of that, though? nobody's, virtually nobody is reading an X-Men comic about Cyclops and being like, oh, he has chronic migraines and a brain injury. That only sticks out if you had chronic migraines or a brain injury. And that's the danger of those fantastic disabilities, or that magical disability.
I was gonna say every book I have read where Cyclops appears from 2 weeks to here, I have only thought about that. But that's because I knew the show was coming. So I was like, is this showing in any particularly meaningful way? And I didn't find that much.
Yes.
Like not enough to recommend a run or a book or something. Like, you have it here. Not like with Karma. I didn't have something that showed it in a very, very explicit and that is not like mentioning it in a little box on the outside.
The answer is always he wears his sunglasses and he learned to be a superhero, and that will solve the problems. That's not very helpful to like an actual person.
Just be a superhero. That's all you have to do. Okay, so we got some comments, and one of them was about Artie and Leeds. I don't know what was of Artie and Leeds, what happened with them.
They were last seen floating around space with the Fantastic Four children.
Oh. So the comment says to bring them back, and Artie became mute because of his mutation. I remember that. And both were treated badly because of their looks. And also this person asked if we will consider the Morlocks a representation of some kind of disabled people within X-Men comics. And I don't know, I'll let you all answer if you think there's some connection there.
I think that it can be with that whole, what you were just saying with the using like analogies and themes and metaphors and there's all 9 yards to show it without actually showing it. And I do think the Morlocks could fit into that because of just the role they've played in the X-Men mythos. And that's just something, I don't know if that's intentional by the writers or not, or if it's something that people who can relate do relate because it's kind of there.
Well, we have at least 2 Morlocks who only have one eye. Caliban definitely has some processing issues. I think there was some chronic pain at some point with Caliban too, but I can't remember if that was a temporary thing or not. But I think there are definitely Morlocks who are disabled. I know there's a few that use canes. So I would say yes, but not in a way that is a major element. There's about as much disability to them as there is an excuse for Claremont to have BDSM, in the comics. No more, no less.
I mean, I was thinking about Callisto before when we were talking about like favorite, disabled characters or whatever. I just think she's a badass. And a lot of them are disabled. I'm pretty sure Mask also has some chronic pain or some other issues. I cannot remember exactly. I know he screams a lot. There was that woman who kidnapped the Power Kids, I think, because she was lonely.
Yeah.
I don't know if I don't know if they're disabled because they're different, because obviously certain of them, like Caliban and stuff, they look, that they can't fit into society. So I would consider that maybe a disability, just that they not fit in. I don't know, that one is kind of it's kind of hard to answer, but like you said, most of them are disabled anyway.
Does Callisto have hands now, or does she have tentacles? She has hands.
She's back to hands.
Back to hands, okay. I mean, I think they could be a great representation in the like proper hands. But when did we have like a book that was called Morlocks? Like no time.
Only for like 4 issues 20 years ago.
Yeah, like that is not something that happens routinely. Like the Morlocks don't get books; they get slaughter in other people's books. But like,
I would recommend for anyone that's looking for an X-Men type book that is about disability more explicitly. Marvel did a series for 3 years called DP7 in the late 1980s that was essentially X-Men, but about disability. They are in a clinic. The characters meet in a clinic in a therapy group because they all suddenly develop superpowers, but the superpowers are treated as a disability, even if they are what we would think of as positive. The guy who becomes super strong and super big, he doesn't know how to physically deal with that, but he also has constant muscle cramps from new muscles coming in, and difficulty navigating his own body. Characters that have, there's a woman who has the ability to heal or to energize other people, but it affects her in her life because her job doesn't want her there anymore because she glows, and her husband, who's an abusive ass, is even more of an abusive ass because now his wife is some special somehow. So if anyone's looking for, I think X-Men doesn't deal with disability explicitly that way, but Marvel did publish a series for several years that went more in that direction.
Oh, that's cool. I've never heard of that.
Me neither. I just put it in my reading list.
I've heard the name, but I didn't know that is what it was about.
Mm-hmm. It is really soapy, I will say that. Deliberately, Mark Grunwald wrote it, and he wrote it. The idea was that if they wrote like a soap opera that had some superpowers in it, they could get that soap opera audience. It didn't happen, but that was the plan.
I mean, it looks great. I'm just looking at it, and it looks like really like that meme that was sharing around these days that like it is an X-Men but feel like X-Men. It looks that way. So we got another comment about a character that Marvel created in the 80s called Blue Ear, because a pair of I don't know if I understand this comic well because of my English. A pair of a deaf child wanted him to wear his hearing aid and have a character to look up to who was also deaf but had a hearing aid.
I actually have heard this story, and it always does make me happy. The story was that there was a deaf kid who never wanted to wear his hearing aid, so the kid's parent wrote into Marvel, and the kid was a huge comic book fan. So there was this character created, and I think he only appeared the one time, and his name was Blue Ear, and he was visibly wearing a hearing aid, and seeing a superhero on panel, and the kid loved comics, it got him to start wearing his hearing aid.
That's good.
And that story just to me shows, the magic of representation and what change it could make to the readers, particularly the young readers.
I was gonna make a comment that was like, I don't know if problematic. like that's one big like cognitive change. Like their parents writing to Marvel to write a book that's like a whole thing. Sorry, too much. I have been too much to therapy, and my jokes are sometimes very. Okay, so now I want to ask Patti in particular. I always do this when people come to the shows, mostly because we're kind of starting. This is the 12th episode, and we have a lot of stuff like to do forward. What would you like to see us do or to talk about? Or if you would want to come other time, what would you want to talk about? Or something like that. Related to X-Men, anything you can imagine.
Oh man, okay. I mean, I haven't looked at all the things you've done already. I should have done that before.
Well,
But I don't know, maybe I guess, have you guys done like an LGBT thing? Yeah, I
yes.
assumed that you already did that.
Whoa.
Two.
Two?
That-
Okay.
That
If
just
you're
means we need to do 3 now.
okay,
Yes, you can come to the third one. When we do the third one, you
okay.
can come
You
to the third one.
just do one just on asexual characters, and I'm just gonna give you all of the characters that are in my headcanon asexual.
I like that.
Okay, you are invited to that. We will
Okay.
put it sometime next year.
Okay, I'll have a camera for that and I'll do my makeup.
That's great. Okay. and oh, my girlfriend is arriving. That was because of the LGBT stuff. She heard that and was like, I gotta get home. And okay, so any other theme you want to talk about? Like anything? We are like in the show we have House of X, the podcast. They came to the show and they proposed various themes. We are definitely gonna do one on family and chosen family, which I think it's a very interesting theme for X-Men specifically. And I'm sure after what has happened today, I should do a mental health one sometime, just so we don't have to overthrow it in all the other places. But if you want to see anything else, just shout it, and we'll probably do it.
Okay.
And I don't know. I think that is all for today. Thank you so much for coming, Patti. And please, everyone that is watching this or that has watched this, I was very nervous at the beginning, so I didn't describe her podcast, but it's a very fun podcast that is like they touch on issues on certain comics, not only issues, but on comics, which is something that we maybe should do sometime instead of trying to talk about everything. And just like disability on the X-Men, and just we throw it like that. And and they also do it like kind of, I don't know, it's very funny. For me, it's very funny to listen. It's always like anecdotes.
Oh, thank you.
I don't know, I have a lot of fun. I always hear it when I'm cooking. Just that's like something I do.
I feel so special. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it was great. I feel like we left a lot of things like we can talk in some other moment, but I knew this was gonna happen because this is like the broadest theme, like them in the world. And also like in the case, like Travis said, a lot of this stuff isn't like in our minds all the time. Like it's just one little thing here, one little thing here, and this character that. And we're probably gonna do a part 2 of this show for people watching. So if someone wants to like say things they want us to hear talk about, or they want us to touch in the part 2 that we probably do next year, like say that on Twitter, on What's the Mutants, and on Facebook too. And we read everything. I usually read everything. And but Gabriel too. And so for real, Patti, thank you so much. And I hope you've had fun as much as us.
Oh, yes, definitely.
So bye, people watching. Thank you all for coming and for all the
Bye.
questions and comments and etc.